Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Emily. Today, we are going to have a conversation with Emily Sung Simon. I learned how to say that name properly about RecOps. The title of our webinar today is very apt. From strategic chaos from spreadsheet chaos to strategic partnership. Strategic chaos, that would mean the end of the world. But just a quick backstory. My name is Tushar Makhija. I'm the founder of Team Ohana. I met Emily through Postman. She's the head of RecOps at Postman. But I really got to spend time with her at the One Rec conference, which was in Chicago a couple of months back. And this was a conference that brought all the RecOps leaders and professionals together for a whole day of conversations, discussions. My conversations with Emily were great about what is RecOps? Why is it so important? Why should Team Ohana be spending more time building the RecOps experience in the product? So we said, look, this is a topic that should not be confined to just 2 people or to the 100 people that came to the RecOps conference. This should be made public for everyone. And that's how the idea about this webinar came together. And Emily agreed. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Tushar. And, those conversations that we had at the One Rec conference were not only strategic, but a little bit strategic chaos and a little bit of spreadsheet chaos. And some were a little bit tough conversations, but great outcomes and so fruitful that I'm excited that everybody can hear more about what we discussed.
Awesome. So Emily, let's reiterating, thank you for doing this. But let's give a quick introduction to the world and every one of our listeners on what is RecOps.
Yeah. So RecOps, also known as recruiting operations, I actually personally like to call it ROPS, just because it's a little funnier for the work that we do. It's essentially we're the catch-all for all things recruiting, minus the actual recruitment of people. So we are the people who manage all things recruiting process. We're the ones that make sure our recruiters are effectively and efficiently sourcing, finding, bringing talent into the pipelines, having those talent conversations, having those sell calls, and more. But we actually don't talk to the candidates for the most part. We enable, and then we make sure that our recruiters are set up for success to do what they do best, which is talk and find people. I think, Tushar, you and I have talked about different parallels of what recruiting operations looks like. I think one parallel that I like to draw, at least, is for those who are on this call who aren't RecOps or recruiting professionals. RecOps is what you would equate to sales operations for salespeople, sales leaders, and ADRs. Sales operations people enable salespeople so they can go out and sell. We do the same thing just for jobs and bringing people in-house versus looking for money. We like to spend.
I mean, I think the parallel definitely makes sense and resonates with me, being on the sales side for the last 15 years. But let's highlight, is there some magic number or a ratio to you need RecOps when you have 10 recruiters? Or how should someone who is sitting on this call imagining, do I need RecOps? So let's try to answer this question from 2 lenses, right? One is, the happy path, which is, hey, if all is going well, here is when you need RecOps. But also, what are the things that you see are going wrong that also should be an indicator to you, hey, you need RecOps? Because you never know when things start going wrong, right? So would just love to get your thoughts on both sides.
Well, let's take a step back here. I like to just share with the group to level set that recruiting operations traditionally has become a function just about a little under 10 years ago. So this is a little bit new of a function. We've always had recruiting people, we've always had sourcers, and we've always had recruiting coordinators, but not a dedicated place that does all the in-between stuff, which is what RecOps does. So this function was actually built out to become an actual function about 10, little under 10 years ago. So with that, the path of when the right time is has changed a lot over the course of 10 years as we think about the landscape of hiring and more. as a recruiting ops professional, I will say it is never too early to have a RecOps person be part of the team. It's never too early and it's always too late. And what I mean by that is, your RecOps person is the person building out recruiting process. Again, really leaning into recruiting operations is who's enabling your recruiters to actually be able to recruit before you even hire those critical hires 1 to 10, right? Or let's say hires 1 to 50. You should have somebody in place now building out the process of what people are you looking for to bring in through the door? What quality of hire actually means for your company? We lean heavily into referrals sometimes of, hey, my friend's cousin's neighbor might be a good fit for your company. And your rec ops person is here saying, let's follow the process and bring them through an interview loop as opposed to just bringing in somebody you know. So, where I'm going with this is it's never too early and it's always a little bit too late because you want to start building out your recruiting processes with a RepGovs person or somebody who is very operationally focused or oriented so that you're not leaning in heavily in additional asks, bringing in tools, spending on talent that may not be the right fit because you haven't built out the foundation of your recruiting team and your recruiting processes yet.
My understanding so far was that this is a very numbers or ops
Yeah.
because of the name ROPS, right?
Yeah.
It's a very ops oriented role, and sometimes, ops has this, should not say a bad rep, but ops tends to look at lagging indicators, right? Let me tell you why it went wrong. Or it's more
Absolutely.
like it's not diagnosis, it's more like, hey, now let's do what's the it's more like RCA or root cause analysis after something has gone wrong.
Sure.
So from that lens, can you share like what are the early signs or what are the leading indicators for a company to start thinking about, hey, we should put in a RecOps professional in the company. We should invest in this role now.
Yeah. I think the number one sign from my perspective is once you start investing in your applicant tracking system, whether that is Greenhouse, Workday, Ashby, there's some new ones out there now as well, maybe a GEM ATS, for example, and you want to and you begin thinking about investing your hundreds of $1,000s into an ATS, that is probably the right time to bring in a RepOps person if you want to put a number to it, because you don't want to waste the hundreds of $1,000s you're spending on implementation to implement incorrectly and then needing to bring in solutions consultants to re-implement or bring in a ROPS person after the fact to fix the ATS that you maybe have implemented not the best.
So I think that's a good marker, right? Hey, if as a finance person or as the CEO, I see a procurement request come in that I want to spend a lot of money on a new ATS and go through that
Totally.
implementation cycle, would you say that the RecOps person is then the owner of the ATS? They should own the
100%.
implementation?
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. Because there's just so many nuances that are so different with the applicant tracking system and the components of thinking about candidate experience, thinking about the different interview stages that you need to build in, thinking about how you're even setting permissions to your interviewers, right? All of those things are so nuanced that most recruiting professionals will either look at a very high level or look at too granularly that they often get it wrong, right? And it's all fixable, right? We're not saving lives, we're recruiting, but it is just a pain in the, and I'm going to say a swear, it's a pain in the ass to have to go back and have to recorrect and re-implement because you're doing so much cleanup and you're building the plane as you're flying the plane, right? Going 100 miles per hour. But
Hmm.
it makes more sense, and it's if we're thinking financially, it makes more sense and will be less spend and will have less spend in the long run if you do end up bringing in somebody to implement correctly in the first go.
Right. I know we're going to talk about KPIs, and I also want to touch on is like where's the existing tool stack missing in order to support a RecOps function. But let's park that for a second. Let's come back and put the spotlight on you, right? Walk us through your journey. I mean, when was the time you just woke up one day and say, "Hey, I'm going to be in RecOps"? Is there a school you go to do RecOps? So let's learn more about Emily, the
Yeah.
person, Emily's journey, and as part of that journey, you coming to Postman, and maybe a few words on Postman too.
Absolutely. So hi, officially, everyone. We should probably should have flipped this question with the last one, but I'm Emily. Um, I actually started my recruiting ops career about 8 years ago. All recruiting people will tell you, we all just kind of ended up here. We woke up one day, tried out this random job, and 10 years later, you're like, oh, I guess I'm a recruiting professional or a recruiting ops professional in my case. I started my career actually as a social worker. I did case management for young people, for kids. I think that's where my organization skills comes into play. I wrangled a lot of children all the time, so now I wrangle recruiters. Some will argue it's the same thing. I'm not gonna admit to anything at all. However, I mean, writing's on the wall. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
I
Um,
mean, I say that salespeople are children too. They have to be wrangled in sometimes, so it's okay.
they're very creative people. That's what it is. So ops, we bring them in.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, at the time, I was living in San Francisco, so working for a nonprofit was not paying the bills. So I made the pivot, and I just kind of took a deep dive. My friend referred me to a contract role at Workday, actually, and I started off as a recruiting coordinator there, contract recruiting coordinator, doing high volume scheduling. At that time,
Hmm.
what I actually didn't know was that we were beta testing Workday's ATS as that recruiting coordination team before it was even called Workday's ATS. It was like, let's try this product in-house. So that actually started off my interest in recruiting operations because we were the people who were asked to give feedback. We are the people to ask and play around and break things in Workday's ATS to see what works and what doesn't. And that's what really drove my interest of, hey, like this is pretty fun for me. Maybe not so much the scheduling piece all the time, but the
Hmm.
actual playing around in the tool, doing a little bit of implementation, doing a little bit of product improvement and giving that feedback was something really interesting for me. From there, I followed a leader to a couple nonprofit or a couple startups that ultimately didn't end up working out. And then I ended up at WeWork, which means that I know how to pick them. Um, at WeWork, I was there as one of the first couple leading recruiting coordinators in the San Francisco office. We helped build out a team and help scale WeWork really quickly, and then we were all laid off. If you guys have seen the documentary, most of it's true. Um, from there, I was able to actually really dip my toes even further into recruiting operations because I was helping manage the tools, LinkedIn Recruiter, things like that, how we're assigning roles, assigning seats. I was actually in Jira helping with referral programming and looking at recruiting operations, not just from the scheduling, tooling, ATS perspective, but then in a bigger lens of how does that environment actually build into the recruiter stack? What does that actually mean? From there, as I mentioned, worked at WeWork, so I left, or I was laid off with everyone else, went to a med tech company. And again, I really know how to pick them because this company no longer exists because they went bankrupt. Um, and I ended up there, owning a lot of the recruiting operations team as a whole because of the fact that they didn't prioritize it. That the model of that recruiting team was essentially to RPO all of recruiting and have everything non in-house. And we were the first people to bring it in-house to actually utilize Greenhouse as the ATS, utilize the applicant tracking system to record interview feedback and thinking about that recruiter implementation as well as thinking about hiring manager and interviewer training to really enhance and enable and build efficiency of how we're bringing in people. So as you're seeing a trend, I'm collecting these skills in my toolbox of what recruiting operations means. Right before Postman, I was at Glassdoor for 3 years. From there, I spent 2 years in the recruiting ops side of the house, building out recruiting operations from the perspective of a DEI lens, how we're being equitable, how we're being fair, how we're bringing in salary transparency, and really elevating recruiting in a more strategic way of our programming to make sure that we're equitable, again, like really fair and really navigating the landscape of the great resignation as well as potential as layoffs and then also coming back into play of hiring freezes, which is happening widespread right now throughout tech companies. I did spend the last year that I was at Glassdoor, excuse me, on the people operations side of the house. I decided to dip my toes out of recruiting. I'm obviously
Mm,
back in the recruiting side of the house now, so I regretted that. But I was able to, from that experience, really learn about owning the totality of a system. So owning Workday as a HRS, being able to see end to end, having that systems thinking, and bringing those skills now back into play over at Postman. I joined Postman just about 4, going on 5 months ago. I've loved it ever since. We do all things API. And for those who don't know, APIs are the connectors that make our world run and work. Anything that's connected to anything at all, that's an API. So really fun stuff that we're doing, kind of nerdy stuff, but I love it because it's the secret sauce that you don't know is there, right? You're like, what is that flavor? I don't know what it is, but it is something critical and important that we have. From here, I work under our head of talent, Pavan. He was a one-man team leading both the recruiting team as well as recruiting operations, as well as building strategy and all things. So he needed some support, and having somebody come in and really focus in solely on the recruiting operations side, especially as we're growing in the next fiscal year, about like 300 roles, hopefully leaning over into that 1,000 plus environment, that mid-size, going from mid-size to a bit larger size. And then being here, being able to take that toolbox that I've collected over the past 8 years of my career and building out all the different really fun and fascinating things and thinking about how to scale really strategically is where I'm at now. So in a
so
very long-winded way, Tushar, um,
we we
8 years,
we
it's been fun.
eh, so let's so I'm going to recap a bunch of
Yeah,
things because
yeah,
there was a lot of good information thrown.
yeah,
But first, let me say this, and because I have a personal relationship with Postman, with your CEO. I've known Pawan, I've known your head of talent, your head of HR, your head of finance. I
yeah.
think you've broken that string of finding companies that don't work out. So now we can if you want to play the odds, and I can bet money on this that you found the best company that you could possibly be in San Francisco right now, right? So um, very good on you, and very smart of Pawan to have found you. But I think what you are also telling us is you are breaking this, I think, myth or this notion that this is all about just capacity, that RecOps is about
Exactly.
capacity planning, and RecOps is only about trying to, you know, get to an optimal flow of, hey, if you want to fill X roles, how do you get there? Which is very important. But I
Yeah,
think through your journey, you touched on RecOps being pretty much I would say that the setting the standard for the company on how you will hire, how will you run interview processes, how will
mhm,
you compensate, how do you think about scaling, how do you think about DEI, and did I say compensation because it's very important? So
yeah,
I think uh, it is a very horizontal role, and I think it's
mhm,
if you agree, me making this point is that companies who are looking to hire RecOps professionals should not think about putting them in a box. It is
yeah,
not about a spreadsheet. Even we haven't even gotten into the spreadsheet chaos part of it yet, but it is absolutely not about managing a spreadsheet, about managing recruiter capacity. That is one important part of it, but my understanding and my um, suggestion to everyone who's listening here today is to broaden your mind about thinking about operationally becoming excellent. It
exactly.
is, and being the cut above the rest, because it's a very hard recruiting market right now. It's not about
It
hiring.
is.
It's not about if you hire like 50 recruiters, suddenly you're going to be able to fill and find the best people. It has to be that whole experience that has to be set
Mhm,
up, um, and that requires a lot of training. That requires a lot of information being shared with, you can be the best engineering leader, but you
yeah,
may suck at managing an interview process, right? Or the sales leader. So I think RecOps plays a very important role. But um, you talked about scale, right?
mm,
That I think that maybe one indicator, like, Pawan waking up one day and looking at his headcount plan and saying, damn, I need to hire 300 people next year. I need help. But now that you've been in the seat for 5 months, is that what else do you think you are, where else you are elevating the game or the operational game for Postman? Like, and again, we're not trying to point fingers, like what is broken. We are trying to just understand, like, hey, in your 5 months, I mean, Postman is doing great as a company, right? So, and you've got a diverse set of people. You're hiring in India, you're hiring in Europe, you're hiring in Australia, you're hiring everywhere, right? Tell me a few more things on why Postman decided to bring you in, outside of the hiring the 300 people next year.
Well, I think a big piece of it is outside of just the hiring, we're looking to hire well and we're looking to hire fast. I think amongst all recruiting people, not just recruiters and RecOps people and recruiting leaders, but even thinking about like HRBPs and, people in the HR landscape, we always ask that question of defining quality of hire. That's the hardest question to define, right? How do you define somebody who's of quality of hire?
How do you define it?
There's no right answer. I set myself up for that one. There's no right answer, right? But it's looking at longevity, potential, and then we go into that rabbit hole of how do you measure potential? How do you get that from an interview process? How do you get that from just having a couple conversations, like 6 hour of worth of conversations with 6 different people with a candidate, for example. Something that we're looking to do really well with our hiring in particular is moving fast and hiring really great quality of people. And the way to do that, and the reason why it's important to have a RecOps person like myself at not just Postman, but whatever company you may be in, is that the way to do that is to use data to drive your process and have your process not actually feel like a process. It's almost like playing a game of Inception. I hope you guys have seen that movie of like Inception or Interstellar or whatever, where you have to kind of implant it in everybody's mind and have that change management with everyone. That process is important and it's key, but you can't feel like you're processing something through rubber stamping or making something like, okay, here's step 1 and here's step 2 and here's step 3. There's kind of a finesse that goes with recruiting operations people that allows for recruiter enablement or interviewer enablement or hiring manager enablement to make it feel natural, so much so that the process is second nature. So much so that you're like, oh, shoot, I didn't realize I was using a manual spreadsheet for each organization thinking about headcount. And that's my Team Ohana plug early on is, I didn't realize that I was doing that and how much time that it took before. And now that I'm using Team Ohana and uploading scenarios really quickly and having managers empowered to upload themselves and really have that strategic thinking about what their orgs and what their teams look like, and then being able to view it as a totality, that is actually us building a process out without people knowing that we're building out the process. And then using that process to enable data and driving data-informed action and changes, as well as using that data to make big strategic decisions of where are we hiring those 300 people? How are we hiring those 300 people? And at what time, what priorities, which teams will we focus, which departments will we focus on first, right? And all of that couldn't be possible if we don't have that kind of secret process built in the back end by us to make people feel like doing certain tasks or doing certain types of planning is a chore. That kind of was all over the place, but
so it's I'll try to bring it in, right? Otherwise, they will fire me from this job, right? What am I doing on this call? But I think, and I've heard this play out in the past as well, right? I mean, I feel very fortunate to work with a lot of scaling companies and both talent, HR, finance leaders. I think in the old way of, hey, we want to hire 300 people, was everybody quickly started filling up a spreadsheet thinking about job titles and not jobs to be done. And it was all about, okay, if I give you this list, how soon can I get you this list that you can start looking for? So it was basically, it is expansion of a team, but because nobody was asking the questions, because I mean, again, let's not blame the spreadsheet, but the spreadsheet is not the place where you get to be strategic in a way, right? It's
exactly.
a single player mode tool, And I think strategy in itself brings different minds together to actually game plan. You said something very interesting about like, hey, it's not about who do we want to hire, where would we hire them? We are a multi-location company, and now, thanks to technology, you can hire the best talent anywhere in the world. How would you compensate them when we compensate somebody? How do we make sure that their individual compensation fits not just the compensation philosophy or the salary bands, but also fits the compensation of the rest of the team members? Because again, that is going to impact your longevity. Sorry, did I say that right?
Yep,
Uh,
yep, you said it
right.
right.
And I'm really trying to think this through. Is also that I can say I'm a sales leader. I wanted to hire all my salespeople as of yesterday, but we forget the time to hire, the time to fill. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
start working backwards. That if you want someone to be, and it's very difficult to do this in a spreadsheet, though, right? If you want
Yeah,
someone to be productive as an engineer, as a salesperson on this date, let's start working backwards, and that is completely lost, and it's not easy to do in a spreadsheet. So I think all of this comes together, and I think that's what you meant by creating a process that did not seem burdensome. It seems very natural. It seems modern. It seems accessible, but it is driving towards this strategic outcome. Because,
mm-hmm.
and I think that is why, I know you want to hire 300 people, but you would do this even if you want to hire 50,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. And that's part of scalability, right? The pushing factor is that you have to hire 300 people, but the realistic thing, and going back to your question earlier of why it's important to hire a recruiting operations person early on, is that you should be doing this at when you're planning to hire 10 people, right? In a hiring sprint at a smaller scale. And then you should use that to help grow and scale. Of course, that process will look different if your company size is a little bit bigger, but the philosophy is there. The philosophy should be the same, and the general practice should be the same of thinking about how you're hiring to scale and how to hire to grow, even though you might be at a different company size.
I think we've really gone deep into certain topics, but let's talk about the KPIs.
Yeah.
And let's talk about like, hey, because at the end of the day, if I put myself in the CEO's shoes, I'm like, okay, I'm going to invest money in this function.
Yep.
Um, what are my deliverables and what are my KPIs for success? And this could be something like, your 5 points or how many ever points that someone writes down on the cheat sheet and says, okay, this is, and imagine somebody listening onto this call and walking into the CEO's or the head of HR's office and say, hey, here is why I need to hire a RecOps person right now. Give me the budget, right?
Yep.
Let me go
Yep.
into Team Ohana and submit a request.
Yeah. Good plug. I think a couple that come top of mind for me, and some of them will be a little bit contradictory, so bear with me. I swear I have a point. I will always lean into the process piece. Recruiting operations people need to be very, very good at being process driven, being data driven, being able to build a really strong process so that the outcome is that you are reducing time to hire. The outcome is that you're building in efficiency for your recruiters. A true example of this is that even at Postman, prior to myself joining, we were managing offers outside of Greenhouse. So what that actually meant is that we would write all offer justifications in a document, then it would go to the rightful people, they would give their approval. Again, spreadsheet chaos. They would give their rightful approval, and then the recruiter would go and check back and see, okay, this person checked it off, we approved, and then we would manually draft offer letters. Even myself joining, we've used automation and implemented automation and auto generation within Greenhouse to have offer templates. Now, what process took 2 days can now take 2 hours because you're going through the system. Somebody's automatically emailed once you hit that request approval button, and they're getting all the details in one place without you having to manually type something out, manually copy and paste something in. Auto generation of offer letters, one click, generate all of that. Tying it back to Team Ohana here, when we think about headcount planning, right? What was previously bi-weekly, if not weekly meeting with finance and FP&A saying, okay, line 1, are you still planning to hire this? Line 2, line 3, line 4. We now have it all in a system where we can auto generate and semi-auto. I would say think about what headcount planning looks like by department, by division, by org leader. If we realize priorities change, we can click them all and then change all the tentative start dates to something later versus previously going in and saying, all right, let me review this Excel sheet. Let me validate. Let me make sure this actually isn't opened in Greenhouse and there's no actual accidents. So that's the process piece. That's the number one root KPI for a recruiting
Mhm.
operations person and the true value that you'll bring. The other aspects that help elevate this though is being data driven, making sure you have data accessible and available to provide insights to your head of talent, to your recruiting managers, to your recruiters, to your interviewers, hiring managers, etc. Whether that's to share with candidates, whether that's to empower conversations that you have with hiring managers, whether that's just to complain, which we know we all love to do as human beings, is saying something's not working. Well, here's the data to prove that it's not working. We're the people to enable, the team to have actual accessible and digestible data and actually analyze it so that we're telling a data story. We're telling a story of what hiring looks like, and we're telling a story of, and maybe sometimes even pushing back about, hey, we can't hire in this market because look, there's literally no talent here. We went out, we sourced, we've gotten 5 offer declines because our compensation isn't fair, or it's not competitive, or what have you. We are the people to drive that data and build that narrative and help build that story so that we can empower recruiters, hiring managers, etc., to have those hard conversations. And then the two pieces that I think are a little bit contradictory but equally important is recruiting operations people need to be strategic. Like at the most forefront, we need to look at recruiting as a landscape from like 100,000 feet up above view. Look at the landscape, not just at your own company, how you're recruiting, but looking at the region, looking at the companies that you compare to and thinking about that and thinking about your recruiting strategies in that way. What I've come to really learn is that hiring in Bangalore, for example, is a completely different beast than hiring in San Francisco. It is completely different way of hiring, and I wouldn't have known that or looked or thought about how our global hiring strategy is without having that huge from the planet above widespread view and thinking about strategy in that way. But at the same time, it is important to be tactical. There's many days where I have to roll up my sleeves, I have to get my hands dirty. I've even given a offer decline call or a decline call to candidates or disposition call because there's such a need to get in the weeds so that you know what recruiters are doing, how recruiters actually work through their workflow. Nothing's worse than, being told to do something or told to work in something another way, but that person has never done what you've done before and they actually don't know what they're talking about. So there's that both that lens of, being strategic, but also being tactical at the same time.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I mean, just this brings this back to that sales ops conversation as well, right?
Yeah,
If you want to grow your revenue by a certain amount, you want to make sure that your account executives are working in the right territories. If there is no buyer there, why would you go there? And that's your 100,000 foot view, right? Um,
exactly.
and because we always revenue teams always get more money. So everybody who is now you can write this down and say, look, this is how you do it on the sales side. The same way you need to do it on the recruiting side. I mean, we all tend to forget is that in order to build more products, in order to sell more products, you first need the people. And people comes before anything else. And
Exactly.
now is the time to invest because you know what? Good people are also hard to find.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's just my wake up that I got just listening to you on this is that we have to invest more on the front end in order to make sure that the downstream impact generates revenue and generates success for us. If we get the
Agree.
first few steps wrong, we're just going to stumble and fall and not get to the impact that we want to generate as a company. But you know what? What's sad is people only talk about the downstream impact in board meetings and everywhere else. That's where the spotlight is. We
Hmm.
need to make sure that heads of HR, heads of talent, heads of finance bring the spotlight back on this ops as well, which is FinOps, talent ops, and talent ops, RecOps comes together in my head. and it's like revenue ops. All of that is needed. So yeah,
Absolutely.
sorry that it was just like a light bulb moment. I wanted to say it out loud so that I
And
don't
we hope everybody else listening had that light bulb moment too.
forget. So we spoke about some of the KPIs. We spoke about process. We spoke about being strategic. I think we've talked about quality of hire. We've talked about time to hire. Um, how are you measuring whether you is there an end KPI on whether you're compensating people equitably, or it is just like, hey, we just got so many rejects, some probably is wrong, and it's more anecdotal, or is there a way to uh, be analytical on the compensation side as well?
Well, I do caveat, I'm not a compensation person. That's a whole different spreadsheet jockey that I wish I had the skill and talent to do to analyze compensation. We do use Radford. So, there are tools out there such as Radford that helps you compare benchmarking, but there is a combination of the anecdotal of, utilizing feedback from candidates and then really revisiting the market and seeing what's out there, and then also using benchmark research and data to see, where we land on the percentage tile of other companies our size, as well as companies with our type of equity. I think as a piece to tie it together as well, there are also, use the resources you have on hand. And what I mean by that is the state of California, for example, and Colorado, New York, you have to publicly list your salary ranges. There's other tools like Glassdoor, Salary FYI, Candidate FYI, things like that, that you can really go out and just do market research. And that could just be really simple market research of, I'm hiring a software engineer in this region. Let's look at a couple roles and see how it compares and how the market compares and companies that our size compare, and then bring that back, compare to Radford, compare to the feedback that you're getting from candidates in real time. Maybe even look at Glassdoor reviews, even though it's not always the most accurate. But those are all ways that you can really think about compensation data for candidates and for roles in particular.
Good. I think we have come full circle. We spoke about the introduction to RecOps. We understood about your journey. We understood about, hey, what is my cheat sheet to go and look at what success looks like. Because we are in annual planning season and
Hmm.
everyone is getting ready for the big push in the new year, right? Together with I gotta lose 15 pounds and I need to generate 5 million in revenue and I need to hire the best talent. So my list of things to do next year is very long, and probably my board is listening onto this and they'll say I forgot a few things and I'll get a text after this, after the webinar. But you are at that juncture. You said 300 people need to be hired, right? How are you using technology and how are you setting yourself up for success? So talk to us about headcount planning, capacity planning, org design, uh, and then also talk to about just like, you're a standout person yourself. You
Hmm.
work for a standout company. It's basically all A players together. So paint us a picture of the life at Postman. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, give people like a glimpse into how you all are continuing to be successful. And I think, just for everyone who's listening, this is a company that is a market leader from day one. It has been scaling efficiently. I have never heard about Postman spending too much money or having to do crazy things in order to save money. This is rarefied situation, right? Now, not everybody can achieve that, but everybody, if you give them that blueprint on your process, your tooling,
Hmm.
and what is going on at Postman, maybe we have an opportunity to replicate it or adapt and learn from it to make ourselves better. And I think that would bring the conversation to its rightful close.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the first thing that comes to mind, and I think it's not an official philosophy here, but I think a philosophy that I have here at Postman is that I'm doing a bit of taking us on a tangent, but I swear I'm going to come back. I'm doing a bit of home renovation right now, and there's that saying that says measure twice, cut once, so that you don't have to, rebuild your house basically. Um, that I bring that same philosophy over to Postman in the sense of how are we thinking about tooling, how we think about implementing, big ticket items, measure twice and cut once. Make sure you're doing the measurements of, again, that data piece, right? Measuring the data. Do we actually need this? Is it a nice shiny new AI tool that, sounds really cool and is really, hot right now in the market, but do we actually need it? I'm not sure if you remember this, Tushar, but at the RecOps conference, there was a huge conversation about how oftentimes AI is mistaken for automation, or automation is mistaken for AI, where we're actually just like automating a bunch of things, and people are putting that AI sticker on it and selling it at an upcharge because AI is the hot new rage right now. Really thinking about what is the actual need, what is the problem we're trying to solve for, what is the outcome we're trying to have, and working backwards, as you said earlier, and bringing in the respective tools and bringing in the respective people to help solve for that question, or solve for that problem. And that is the best way you can come to a strong outcome, and maybe sometimes a conservative outcome, but a strong outcome that can help you scale and help you grow in the long run. I'll say that, while also in the same breath saying it is also very important to take the risk sometimes. You often have a gut feeling of a certain product. Team Ohana, for example, I think we were one of the earliest adopters at Postman of Team Ohana. A lot of
Customer
that
number two.
customer number 2. And a lot of that is, having that gut feeling of knowing you need something and knowing that let's build that together. Let's, really take in that opportunity to build and scale together so that we have the outcome. A big piece of our uh-huh.
I was just going to say that because you come from such a diverse set of companies, right? And just looking at Glassdoor, a very well-known brand company, they've got their shit together and then we work scaling really fast, and now
Mhm.
you're at Postman. Compare and contrast a bit for us to change or how your process is working.
Yeah, yeah. I would say Postman is the in between. If we're thinking Goldilocks, Workday moved a little bit too fast. Glassdoor, really well renowned, but works a little bit too slow, a little bit more rubber stamping. Postman's right perfectly that middle for me,
Mhm.
where we get to move fast, but at the same time, we're having those checks and balances. I'm able to go to Pavan and say, "Hey, I'm really, really invested in this tool, and I think this would be really great for us and help us scale." He'll ask me those hard questions. He'll ask me, and he won't just give me, like a blank check. And I don't think Ajay, our head of people, will give me that blank check at all either. But, they both will ask me those hard questions of why do we actually need this? What is the problem you're trying to solve for this with this? And are there any other tools, or are there any other things that you think can help, solve for this problem without maybe spending a big price tag or without this luxury brand, for example? And I think having that in between of being able to answer those hard questions, but also having the freedom to be creative and explore and move quickly when we do need to move quickly has really helped us scale and make the right decisions on the investments that we're trying to make.
You also spoke about not having at Postman not have to deal with certain amount of spreadsheets and how that has changed your relationship with finance, because I think in any ops role, and especially in recruiting, which is the company's large, like we are, people
Yeah.
are the company's largest expense. You have
Yep.
to work closely with finance as well. Um, and um, um, talk us through that journey. What has changed? What is
Yeah.
different? How has that been operating for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. For me, one, I actually in our San Francisco office, I sit right across from our head of finance. He is the nicest person ever. But in my past life, I would never do that because we're always having conversations with FP&A. We're chasing each other. Where's this sheet? Where's this sheet? What's the latest update? What are things like that? With Team Ohana in place for headcount planning in particular, there's no need to do that anymore because there's no versions of sheets that are needed. Everything's live. Everything's up to date as you're making those updates in real time. Of course, we're still chasing each other for approvals, but that's, I think, a human needing to press a button type of issue.
we are launching a new feature that we will text Yatin every time you want. Yatin is the head of finance. Every time you need an approval, or text Abhinav if you need an approval. Only for you. We're going to ship that feature.
Yes, perfect. Right. Of course, the ability to look at things real time versus moment in time has really been a game changer. And it's really prevented us from having those uncomfortable, awkward conversations of, do I owe you something? Where did we last leave off? Because we can actually look at those comments on the sidebar. We can look at those real-time changes and the change log, right, of what's happened, what's changed without having, too many back and forth conversations, without reading through a mountain of Slack messages that we miscommunicated with one another. It's all there in real time that we can really, really come in and look at and just drive efficiency, move fast, but also have those good like green check marks of approvals, comments, change logs, things like that.
And we the coming back to this, the title of the webinar, right, from spreadsheet chaos to strategic partnership. I think as part of the closing, and thank you so much. This has been I knew I was going to learn a lot from you and about the RecOps function, and the intrigue that I had that was sparked at one Rec conference in Chicago. I think it is coming full circle now for me to appreciate the strategic role that you play, and that leads me to my final question. And then we'll open it up for some questions. But it's what is that strategic partnership look like now? How can you sit back, sipping on your coffee or tea, and say, "Hey, I am a strategic partner to the business"? What
Yeah.
in a nutshell, what would you say to that?
I would say it's more of a feeling. I never once feel like I'm being told what to do, and I never feel bad for asking questions. I think historically, when you aren't in that strategic partnership, you're often told by finance, you're told by hiring managers, you're told by department leaders, this is what the update is, update it. You're told, right, to make these changes or to make these adjustments, figure it out. You're open to interpreting what, is in their brains that they can't regurgitate out into words, into recruiting language, in short. I think for myself now, being more of a strategic partner, especially when it comes to headcount planning, it's more collaborative. We're having a conversation. I'm able to push back and ask questions. I don't feel dumb because I'm asking a question about clarification about certain headcount points. And I think this also goes to show, right, the culture at Postman as well, is that people will never make you feel that way. It's genuinely the nicest people ever working here, in the sense where they're happy to have those collaborative conversations. It's never a me telling you, or like I'm the CEO, telling you this is the plan. It's more, if you have questions, let's talk about it. Let's have that discussion. Let's be fruitful about how we're thinking. And you bring your expertise in recruiting to me, and I'll bring my finance expertise to you, and we'll collaborate and we'll work together to think of what the best plan and course of action is to reach those 300 hires, and for where those are distributed, for what those priorities are, and how those business leaders can tell us their strategy, and we work together to do a bit of that planning. That is the big key difference for me, at least, when compared to other companies where we're just, it feels like you're on the hot seat. It feels like you're being grilled, right, and interrogated by, why haven't you done this, or why hasn't this been uploaded, or you need to do this. Instead, it's very much so, all right, how do we tackle this together, and what is the problem you're trying to solve?
I mean, tools can be good enabler, but at the end of the day, it is this culture of collaboration that actually makes the difference, right? You cannot, I mean, tools will bring in the efficiency, will provide you with the automation, but I mean, as always, right, the right people in the right culture is the true ingredient to, the ultimate success. Because we had a few folks email us some questions. We've selected 3. We'll go very quickly
Sure.
on these. This is Sonia here. She's a talent acquisition operations manager at Delta Dental of California, and she asks, interested in learning more about the balance between driving recruitment marketing within RecOps in partnership with social. Okay. That we should have asked them to clarify, but does that make sense? Is that what
Yeah,
balance between? Yeah, go ahead.
I think I can interpret a little bit. I think the question is around employer branding and talent branding and how
Hmm.
we can bring that into social media. I'm gonna assume it's probably TikTok because that's the hot new Instagram Reels, things like that. Um, you know, as we're n and this is the big thing, right? Like, as we're thinking about hiring the new talent, which is Gen Z, right? We have to think about talent marketing and talent, marketplace in a different way, and I think Duolingo does a really great example of this, where they have really, really funny TikToks and bringing in talent attraction. Um, for that question in particular, have we thought about it? I think that's the hot topic right now, along with AI. Have we done it at Postman? Have we done it at Glassdoor, my prior company? Yes and no. Postman does a really, really great job in all of the LinkedIn's, the videos, the ads that we bring out. We even have a graphic novel on APIs, which is really crazy. Look it up; it's really interesting. But I don't think that we've launched, fully into the TikTok world yet, and creating reels and social media campaigns in that way. I do think that is the future, and that's and that's where we're headed to moving forward, but not
I
yet.
mean,
Hopefully there soon.
so very soon we'll see Pavan dancing on TikTok saying
I hope so.
recruiting for Postman.
I
All
hope
right,
so.
he's gonna kick my butt for asking that question. But what who do you think this is from our friend Jeremy Lyons at RecOps
Oh.
Collective? Who do you think is the hardest strategic stakeholder to partner with and convince of the value of RecOps? Always trying to stir shit up. Jeremy Lyons, yes.
Jeremy and I work together at WeWork, and we work really closely together at RecOps Collective. So he's always giving me the habanero, level spicy questions. Um, but I appreciate them. I think the hardest partner to work with and to get on board for recruiting ops, and this is going to be a hot take. So
This
where
is going to be our TikTok that we post on all social media
maybe
channels. Yeah.
I actually think it's recruiters. Recruiters, you know,
Mm.
recruiters love to recruit, but they hate following a process, even if it's like, this is a really strange analogy, but I think is a good one. When you're a child and your parents are like, "You need to do this. Like, I know what's best for you. Like, just trust me, trust the process, like, please." And you as a teenager are like, "No, I know what's best. Like, I got my own way of doing things that works out well. Like, it works for me." Your parents are looking at you and they're like, "This is crazy. This is backwards. They're doing 18 extra steps to get to the outcome." I think that sometimes is the relationship of recruiters and recruiting operations people, and the struggle that we have of, a lot of recruiters have been recruiting for a long time, but as new tools come into play, as strategies change, as, we have new technologies and a new process and things that are built, you know, oftentimes they're like, this is work, but it's hard. It's hard to make, change is hard. It's hard to be able to shift into that new landscape. Thinking about the TikTok perspective. It's hard to go into TikTok and build those TikToks to find talent versus what we've been doing, which is posting on LinkedIn.
Right. One last question, and because is there so how do you if you're new to RecOps, right? And there are there are difficult personalities in the room.
Yes,
How do you earn the trust of the leadership? If
yeah,
you are early, and especially say VP of engineering, always very skeptical. They are.
totally. They're too smart for their own good. I think from my experience, two main pieces of advice. One, become really good at managing upwards. And what that means is know your audience, right? Whether you're talking to a head of people, a head of engineering, a CTO, a CPO, whatever that may be, know how to manage upwards, have those smart conversations with leaders, ask right questions, ask really good inquisitive questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions. It's better to say you don't know something than to assume and then get it totally wrong. And then they're like, "Ooh, what's going on?" It's not listening to me. And then the second piece is over communicate. There's so much value in over communicating, being transparent, being honest, being upfront. People love that authenticity. I think that's, how Tushar and I really got to know one another is, we were very authentic, very honest with one another, even if they were hard conversations, and over communicating the ask, providing the context, being transparent about just all the things really helps build trust because they see you as a real person and they see you for who you are and, not just the role that you are in a job.
Awesome. So, Emily, if people have to find you,
Yeah.
it's okay. They reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Find me on LinkedIn, Emily Dash Sung. I didn't add my new last name, Simon, in there yet, but on LinkedIn, Emily Sung Simon. That's me. Feel free to connect. I'm always happy to chat. I call myself a certified yapper, so I love to yap and we can chat all day long.
Well, this was educational. It was funny. It was truly you brought your full self, Emily, to this conversation. I cannot thank you enough. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Reach out to Emily. She's not joking that she would like to talk to you and
Yeah.
share her perspective. And then because we are in the holiday season, happy holidays to everyone.
Awesome. Thank you all. And thank you so much, Timohana and Tishar, for having me. I've had so much fun having this conversation. And, I love talking about all things RecOps. And please reach out. Don't hesitate.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
everyone. Bye.